Hey guys! So in this video we are going to talk about how to tell if somebody is a professional or not. So let's get into it. Now, this is of course highly subjective, and the reason why I'm making this video is actually more because there are so many people who are asking me how they will know when they are a professional, or how they know if somebody is a professional, and so forth. And unfortunately, you and I and everybody else in programming have this issue where there's so much ambiguity and so many people using your coding skills as a benchmark to determine whether or not somebody's a professional. But that, just because you can write code doesn't make you a professional. Unfortunately, there's so much it's kind of like what the engineers are facing, and I really feel sorry for people who actually are civil engineers or mechanical engineers and so forth, because I mean, we do it too. Like, I hate the fact I've been working with people who have the job title testing engineer or front-end engineer or whatever, and the problem with this is that when you use the term engineer that loosely, you muddy down the meaning of that term, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. It could mean anything, and that's actually a big issue, because the people who actually went to school and really tried hard and are trying to get a job or so forth, they now have to deal with all this bullshit that comes with having a term that means absolutely it doesn't mean anything anymore. And you see, this is not an issue for other professions. Like, take a doctor, for example. You don't see people, like, there's an exam for being a doctor or an attorney, standardized test that determines whether or not you have the right to call yourself a doctor. We don't have that, and that's a problem. It's a good thing and a bad thing, but it gets to be mostly a bad thing when you have all these people claiming that they have skills that they don't have, or they're using that software engineer, software expert, or whatever, programmer or whatever, to raise their own value, or at the very least they don't have a good understanding of what it actually means to be a professional. So I have two scenarios where I can give you where I've really been able to kind of make a distinction here. So the first time I ever talked to somebody who I realized, like, this person is she's just a business type of person. She is not a software engineer. She is not a programmer. She is trying to sell the idea that she has those skills, but she does it for a bad reason. So I was talking to this, and this usually, guys, you should know this is usually the strategy of people at the management level. What they will do is that they will, because they know that hard coding skills and engineering expertise is very sought after, especially not just by programmers, but also in manager types of positions. Because a manager these days, the consensus in the IT industry is that if you have a technical manager, that person should ideally know programming. It just didn't used to be that way, but it's getting to the point where that's a hard requirement. I'm not saying hard requirement, but it's very desirable if your tech lead actually knows how to program. That means that, of course, business-oriented people will do it is so vicious. What they will do is that they will get the absolute bare bone basic programming skills that they can, or learn a few terms, and they will use that in their pitch because they are not engineers. They don't approach the problem as an engineer. They approach the problem as a business person. You fake it. That's basically what they do. They get irrelevant knowledge or very skin deep things that they can say in a job interview that tries to convince the person who's doing the hiring that, hey, they actually know more than they do. And I was talking to such a woman not that long ago. It took me, I think, 10 minutes of conversation to figure out that she was all talk. It was just talk, all of it. And it was very easy. She was a so-called front-end expert. And I asked her, okay, cool. This was a few years back, and so this was just when ECMA 6 or ES6 was coming out, or so forth. And I just asked her, like, oh, so are you excited about the new standard that's coming out? And do you have any favorite new features? And she couldn't answer me. And that's not a big thing. I mean, not everybody keeps track of things that are up and coming. So I said, okay, and she kind of said that she wasn't paying all that much attention to it, and I can respect that. It's okay. And then I asked her, okay, so what are some technologies that you usually use? Like, do you have any favorite tools or anything like that? Because, I'm looking to expand my own knowledge. And she couldn't answer me either. She said, yeah, I use mostly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I kind of went, well, yeah, that's what the job is about. That's not tools. Those are technologies that you have to use in order to do your job. When I talk about tools, I usually talk about, are you using a library? Are you using, what editor are you using? Are you using, this is something that is very crystal clear to a programmer. Like a true veteran will be able to tell you what tools are. And that's another red flag, or my first red flag. And then I asked her, so what's your education background? And then she explained to me that she had studied to become a webmaster. That's a red flag. Big red flag. Her age, and well, she wasn't all that old. Her age and using a term such as webmaster, it's a very outdated term these days. It's not something that, I haven't heard anyone use that term in a very, very long time. So if we combine a lack of interest for what's coming up with the fact that she doesn't understand what tools are, or rather she doesn't have a preferred tool suite that she works in, and that she uses outdated terms, it kind of indicates what I was suspecting, that she doesn't have up-to-date knowledge. She is not that relevant anymore. And then I kept on talking to her, and it kind of became obvious that she'd spent most of her good part of the past 5-6 years in management types of positions. And yeah, of course, it was for me, it felt very obvious that was the situation. So what does it sound like when a true professional is talking to you? A hardened, a good professional, someone you can trust, knows their stuff? Well, you can ask them questions that that somebody who doesn't actually do programming will ever be able to answer. I asked one of my own colleagues at my previous job, okay, and rather he asked me, what's a good question? I said, well, a good question is, what ORM do you use and why do you use that ORM? And he immediately, without breathing, second breath was, oh, well, it kind of depends. We're doing PHP, and I don't really like ORMs in PHP. I prefer, if I'm using something like Java and using Hibernate, maybe that's kind of a standard there. And I stopped him and I said, yeah, best answer you could have given me. You gave me a straight up answer. You know exactly what I was talking about. No question. And then I could ask, all right, can you give me a few common fields that are usually good to make indexes of? And he said, yeah, probably user ID, maybe a product ID, and user email maybe. Those are very common types of indices. And he gave me a few other, of course, as well. And I immediately, yeah, awesome. That's great. No junior would ever be able to answer that. Or rather, somebody who doesn't, most people don't even know what an index is in the context of a database. And I said, all right, cool. When I want to do caching, HTTP headers and stuff of that nature, what headers would you put on, say, a CSS file? And he said, well, okay, the max age, for example. And he started giving me all these different headers that are relevant to caching, and he kind of explained why he was thinking that instead of that. And this is what I'm telling you guys. A true professional will be able to answer these sorts of questions because they are above beginner level, and the only way that you can know this is if you've actually done it. And there's tons of these questions, so many of them. And the beauty about these questions is that you don't actually have to be a specialist. These are things that are fairly standard types of knowledge for somebody who actually does this at a professional level. So if you were listening now and you don't know what an ORM is and when to use one and when not to use one, what an index is, and what's a good index and what's a bad index, then you are not a professional. And it's okay. I just want you to understand that it's very tricky for programmers and for companies to deal with these sorts of people who there are various reasons why they do this. As I said, there are some people who think that it's going to further their career to associate themselves with coding skills, because coding skills are in high demand. But don't mistake that high demand for being, like, people are not looking for hobby level programmers, they are looking for professionals. And that's a big difference. It's the same. I would like to end by saying this. Anybody can become a programmer, but they have to put in the work and they have to really want it, because it gets to be really tricky for everybody. It just gets to be a mess when everybody calls themselves something that they're not. A good example is when you have these different triathlon races where they don't do a benchmark test before the race, because the really messy races is when you put all the people that are severely overweight in the mix with everybody else, and like the triathlon runners who do this almost full time, they are forced to deal, you mix all these different levels of skill, or these levels of fitness, into one big pile, and it just becomes a mess. What you want is a benchmark, so that the people who can run the fastest are in the front and the people who are not so fast are in the back, because that's going to be a much better experience for everybody. At least that's how I feel about it. Have a great day.